A couple of weeks ago I put a new loading belt into this Tascam DA-30 Mark II DAT deck, and I thought the machine was then working, but unfortunately after I'd cleaned it all up and got it hooked up to some other equipment, I found that it's actually got another fault, in that none of the analog inputs or outputs are working. So the deck's working fine with its digital inputs and outputs, but if I try and play a tape, I get nothing at all from any of the analog outputs, including the headphone output, and I can't record from any of the analog inputs. But, the rest of the machine seems to work fine. Now, oh, this one screws in the back, isn't there? I've had a quick look at the service manual, and it seems that there is a completely separate board which is concerned only with the analog ins and outs. So I'm guessing something on that board has failed. So first thing I'm going to do is try and gain access to that board, which I think is underneath the main digital in-out and Syscon board, which is this main circuit board here. So underneath there, I think I can just see it through that gap there, is the analog I/O board. So if I lift this main board out, hopefully that'll be able to just sort of flop over there. Actually, I'm clearly not the first person to be in here, am I? Because all the cable ties have all been undone. So that'll make it a bit easier to dismantle anyway. But this machine's clearly had issues in the past, hasn't it? Because someone else has done some maintenance on it. But I'm hoping if I just remove this top board, I can flip that over and we'll get access to the analog board underneath. So let's try and do that. We've got this thing as well. Have to take those out to get that out. Just use some needle nose pliers to get these. I hope this whole board will just kind of lift out. It's actually handy someone's undone all the cable ties. Will that just flip over? There we go. And there is the analog board under there. I'm just having a little look around. All the capacitors visually look okay. It doesn't necessarily mean to say they are, but none of them have obviously puffed up or leaked that I can see. There's a little cluster of, what are they? Are they voltage regulators there? So these are 4 voltage regulators, I believe. This is a 7805, which should give 5 volts, and that's a 7812, which should give 12 volts. Can't see what these are, but I'm guessing they're going to be -5 and -12 probably. But, I doubt they'll have failed, but since they're relatively easy to get to, we'll give them a try. So firstly I'll just check that the common pin on those voltage regulators actually goes to the ground of the chassis. I'm sure it probably will, but it's worth checking. The capacitor's a bit in the way. It says G on it actually, so I reckon that probably is going to be ground. Yes. Now should we check the 7805? Get onto the ground pin of that. Is that ground? Yes, it is. Right, that's useful. So we can use this chassis here as the ground. Just check the output voltages on these regulators. So let's check the 12 volt one first, since that's a little easier to get to. So just push that capacitor out of the way slightly just to make sure I'm on the right pin. That is on the output pin, so power up. Yep, 12.1 volts, that's absolutely fine. Let's check the 5 volt one. It's a little bit trickier to get me probe on this one. I'll just have to push that capacitor out of the way slightly. The output pin? Oh, there we are. It's this end. That's useful. So this one should be 5 volts. So power up. .35 volts. That's not right. Definitely on the output pin of that. Yes, I was definitely on the output. Let's check the input to that regulator then. The input should be something above that. It's got 12 going into it, and yet the output is 2.3 volts. Well, there's definitely a fault there. So, I wonder if that's being dragged down by an overload. Something's gone short circuit or something and it's pulling that voltage down, or has that voltage regulator just failed? I'll leave the deck switched on for a few minutes and just see if that gets hot. The deck's been on for a good 5 minutes now and all those regulators are still stone cold, so I don't think there's an overload going on here. I think that voltage regulator's just gone down. That's a 7805, yeah. That should be giving 5 volts on the output pin. Now, can I get to the other two to check them? I think the only way I'm going to be able to test these other 2 voltage regulators is to remove this audio board, because I just can't get my meter probes in underneath. So the board's going to have to come out anyway to change that one that's obviously gone. So it's just, oh, it's going to be quite a big job again because we've got all the screws in the back panel as well. Anyway, let's get that board out. Now hopefully this board should come out. If I can get the connectors through their holes, there we are. Now is this going to lift out? Oh, that's fouling that wire there. Get that through. There we are. Ah. Oh, there's a couple of little circuit boards up here with what look to be more voltage regulators, and they're stopping this audio board from coming out. Oh, that's annoying. Yeah, because it can't come up this side because there's a flange here, and it can't come up this side because of these 2 voltage regulators here. These 2 are going to have to come off, aren't they? Oh, how annoying. That might just have given me enough clearance, you know, to be able to get onto the output pins of those voltage regulators. Let's see if I can do it, because I've got a meter probe which I've bent at a 45-degree angle. That may enable me to get into there. Let's try that. So here's my customised meter probe. Let's see if that will enable me to get in. It's helpful that they've labelled the output pins with an O and the inputs with an I. But let's just make sure that's not earthing something out that shouldn't be earthed out. I wonder if it's worth just propping that up slightly just to make sure it's not. I will do that actually. I'll just use a plastic pen that's non-conductive just to keep that away from the bottom of the chassis, just so we don't earth anything out that's not meant to be earthed out. Make sure that's fine there. So in theory, if I can get my probe, this is, I'm probably going to get right in the way of the camera here, so you might have to take my word for this one, because it's quite awkward to get to, but I'll give it a try. In fact, being able to see what I'm doing would help. I can't read the numbers on these. Right, that is on the output pin of that rear regulator. Power on. Minus 12.3 volts. That's fine. Let's see if we can get onto the output pin of that regulator. Ooh, without touching that capacitor. Be awkward yet. We're on it. That is minus 5.01 volts. So yeah, we've definitely got this 7805 regulator is outputting the wrong voltage, isn't it? Let's just reconfirm that once more. So, output pin of that. I'm still using my bent probe, I don't need to now, but anyway. Power up. 2.35 volts, that's not right. So, hopefully if we just replace that regulator, the machine will work. So let's try. Now, as I say, these two regulators are going to have to come off this piece of chassis because they're going to stop me lifting the circuit board out. So let's remove them. With those loose, can we now lift this circuit board out? Yeah, here she comes. Not easy, is it? There we go. Out. Now, should have removed the connectors before I did that really, but still. I don't think these are actually connectors. I think they're permanently soldered onto there. But hopefully I can get access to these components with those wires attached. Yes, I've got plenty of room here to work. So I've just noticed that these regulators have actually got a plastic part here rather than the ones I've got, which have got a metal part here, which is common with the ground pin. So I'm just going to check that that heatsink is ground, which it is. That's fine. So I can put my replacements in there with the metal common. So first of all, screwdriver's too long. First of all, I've got a shorter screwdriver and remove oh, that's tight. Now will that come away from the heatsink? Yes, there we are. Right. Now we should be able to desolder that. So it's this one that's actually, it's this one, isn't it? Let's flip the board up. It gives us access to the solder pads there, and it's this one here that we're interested in. In fact, have we got a bad solder joint there by any chance? I don't think that pin is soldered properly. So maybe we don't need to replace this component. It could just be, if I resolder the pins, the machine will work. Should we try that first? I think having come this far, I'll put the new regulator in anyway, but it'd be interesting to know if that's the cause of the problem, won't it? So let's just resolder that pin. Actually, none of them look brilliant, but I think they're probably all okay. Anyway, okay, let's just lower this board back into position. Actually, I don't need to fully put it back, do I? As long as it's not as long as it's not touching anything. That should be okay, and they're okay. Obviously I'll only be able to do this for a few seconds because I've got no heat sinks at the moment. Let's try this again. Output, power, No, still 2.3 volts. So I think that regulator has gone. Let's unsolder this. Right, that should now have fallen out, which it has. So there's the old component. Let's get the new one. Put some new heatsink compound on really, but in fact it's probably going to be easier to screw that in onto the heatsink before I solder it up, so let's do that. It's quite fiddly. Right though. I won't tighten that right up, I'll solder it in first. Oh, it's a bit of a funny end on my solder. Let's get rid of that. Tighten that up. Well, job done. Now then, how brave am I? Do I test it or do I just go ahead with the reassembly? Let's just reassemble. Reattach these before I forget. panel screws again. I think the first thing I'll do is just power it up, make sure we don't get a puff of smoke. Here we go then, moment of truth. No puff of smoke. Relays seem to be clicking. Right, let's play a tape, see if we get any audio from it. Right, firstly I'm going to try the headphone output. So let's put a tape in. And push play. Yes. I have a tone coming through the headphones. Just tested all the analog inputs and outputs on this deck, both balanced and unbalanced. The tape you're listening to now, I've just recorded on this machine via the balanced analog input, and it's being played back from the balanced analog outputs into a pair of little powered speakers just for demonstration purposes. So that's all the analog inputs and outputs now fully working. So that one little voltage regulator had taken out the entire analog board, so we had no analog inputs or outputs just because of that one little regulator. So there you go. Thanks very much for watching, hope you enjoyed it.